recognizing a quorum, I am calling this meeting of the Cannabis Control Commission to order as of 11:34 a.m. on. I'm calling this meeting the Cannabis Control Commission to order at 11:34 a.m. on January 30th. 10:32. Thank you. It's so good to have other commissioners to keep me out of trouble. Let me do this again. 10:34 on January 30th, 2018. Can I ask, is anybody recording this meeting? Let me put the public on notice, therefore, that this meeting is being recorded. Can everybody hear me in the back? Thank you. And can I ask the commissioners to turn their microphones on when you're speaking, please? Thanks. Or you can keep them on. Let me go through the agenda quickly. I have just a couple of comments, and mostly just I wanted to update people on the schedule for public hearings coming up over the next 2 weeks. We'll then go through and try to catch up pretty extensively on minutes from previous meetings. I think we have 5 sets of minutes that we're going to review and discuss and hopefully approve. The executive director has 2 additional job descriptions that he would like us to discuss, review, vote on, and approve for additional jobs within the commission. We may set a deadline of the end of January to make nominations for the Citizens Review Committee. Each of us, I think, is prepared to make those recommendations to the executive director. The executive director at that point owns the process, and he will finalize the composition of that committee. So hopefully we'll all be able to make those nominations today. I want to continue the conversation about possible locations for our permanent office. We, again, don't need to, nor should we try to make a decision, but we are trying to give more guidance to DCAM in terms of the areas they should focus and put into the RFP that they're going to develop with the executive director's input. And then we'll do our normal closing routine. So that's it for the agenda. I just wanted to put up the schedule. I'm sorry, not where I wanted to be. I want to put up the schedule for the public hearings. We have published these on our website. We have made public notices in the Herald, but given this just an additional forum for people, I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of the schedule. I think there's 10 altogether starting next Monday morning in Pittsfield. So Kay and I will be covering that. We're going to Holyoke the same day. That'll be Kay and myself as well. Greenfield the following day, Hyannis also the following day, and Dartmouth also on the 6th. We will do Worcester and Danvers on the 7th. We will do downtown Boston on February 8th, the Vineyard on the 9th, and then we'll do our final session in Roxbury on the 13th. Just like we did with the public listening sessions that we conducted back in the fall, there'll be 1 or 2 commissioners at each of these meetings. It just doesn't make logistical sense to try to get all 5 of us in the same room at the same time and to cover as many parts of the state as we'd like to. So it'll be done the same way with 2 commissioners, I think, pretty much at every one of these meetings. And we'll have Sean at some and Christine at some as well. Because we're going to be on the road for most of the next 2 weeks, we'll talk about this at the end, but I think it's unlikely we're going to be able to get a quorum together for a public meeting next Tuesday. So at the end of this, I think, unless there's any objections from my fellow commissioners, we'll set a schedule that probably won't include a meeting next week. The real urgent order of business that we'll have to have a meeting for whenever the executive director tells us we're ready is to approve the final contracts with our 2 technology vendors, and I know that Sean and Christine and Luella are working on that. Hopefully it'll be relatively quick so that we can get them started, and whenever they're ready, we'll, with 48 hours notice, convene a meeting to review and approve those contracts. Okay? So that's it for opening comments. As I said, I want to try to catch up. We want to try to catch up on minutes, so we have I think 5 sets of minutes, if I'm correct, to review and approve, starting with, if I'm correct, December 12th. So that was the 2nd day of our policy discussions. These minutes have been circulated to everybody on the commission. Some of the commissioners have had feedback. They've been incorporated into the notes that were circulated by the executive director last evening. So hopefully they're pretty set, but let me start with December 12th and ask if there are any comments about or questions about the minutes for December 12th, 2017. Okay, then can I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes for December 12th, 2017?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
I think Bert beat you. Let the record show that the motion to approve was made by Commissioner Flanagan and seconded by Commissioner McBride. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So let the record show that the minutes for December 12th, 2017 were approved unanimously by the Commission. Next, December 13th, 2017, again circulated and edited based upon input. Any comments? Okay, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Can I let the record show that Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the minutes for the December 13th, 2017 meeting. Next, December 14th, 2017. Any comments or questions? Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Let the record show Commissioner McBride made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the minutes for the December 14th, 2017 Commission meeting. Next, January 17, 2018. Any comments or questions? Great. Did I have the date right, Sean?
We have to change the date on the heading. It says 2017 and not 2018.
Okay.
Other than that.
With that change, can I have a motion to approve with that change for January 17, 2018?
So moved.
Second. So let the record show that Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Title. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the minutes for January 17th, 2018. And the last set of minutes is for January 23rd, 2018. Any comments or questions?
Same edit as well.
Same edit. Okay. So can I have a motion to approve with the edit?
I know. I apparently don't want 2018 to happen. Sorry about that,
I
guys.
don't think there's a whole lot you can do about that.
No.
Okay. Anyway, can I have a motion to approve January 23rd, 2018 minutes?
So moved.
Second. Can I have a second?
Second.
I'd let the record show Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the minutes for January 23rd, 2018. Sorry, Kate.
Can I make a comment about the minutes for the public?
Sure.
I've been getting a lot of requests for meetings about things that are coming up over and over again, like event licenses. Oh, thank you. Sorry. I've been getting a lot of meeting requests from the public for things that are coming up over and over again, like event licenses and host community agreements and other things like that. I wanted to let you know that these meeting minutes that we just approved from the week of December 11th in particular, they're like 30 pages long, and they have every single comment that the commissioners made in the discussions. So if you weren't able to make those meetings, you should go to the website, open that document, do a search for whatever you're interested in, and then before you talk to us, you can find out, you can catch up on the discussion.
Thanks. Okay. So, Mr. Executive Director, you have 2 job descriptions.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with the Director of Licensing, which was circulated, and I have copies if anybody does need any. So you'll note in that job description, this position would report to our yet to be identified and hired Chief of Investigations and Enforcement. The reason I'm putting this before you today is to allow that person the same luxury that I had, which was when they do arrive that they have an open position that is pending and they can begin to conduct interviews right away, so as to staff up in anticipation of the licensing deadline, the licensing expectation of April 1st, and therefore giving them significant lead time or sufficient lead time to begin the process of hiring a licensing team, and someone can therefore absorb that process as they get up to speed as well. So the position, as you can see, is in front of you. Is pretty robust about the licensing process, and this position in particular would lead the review and kind of workflow of license applications as they come through the door. So any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Any questions on this? Okay.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
First, I just want to reiterate my suggestion to include the salaries in the job description.
Sure.
Second, at the end of the first section, it includes the different types of marijuana establishments, I didn't see labs in there. I wasn't sure if that was intentional or not.
It is not. It was not intentional. You can certainly add it.
Okay.
And I should say I took your feedback the last time, your suggestion last time. When we post positions, I am publishing a salary range to set that expectation, but I'll also begin to include it in the job description as well.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, because people might click on it in different places.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Sure. And then lastly, I have a request for an addition. One under experience and one under knowledge and skills, but they go together. Under experience, I wanted to add, under job function, I wanted to add minimizing bias in the application and licensing process. And then under knowledge and skills, I wanted to add experience building cultural competence among a team.
Can you, I just explain, if you wouldn't mind, Commissioner Childs, cultural competence?
Yes, so the idea of having that experience of building cultural competence is a way to make sure that the person is prepared to minimize bias in the application process, and that just goes to the phenomenon when you're reviewing applications for jobs or licenses or anything else, where if people haven't had certain cultural competence training, they may tend to favor things that are worded in a certain way that are not necessarily related to the quality, but are in fact related to culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just have one
Please.
question? The part that you said minimize bias is one of the functions or responsibilities. Why specifically state that? I mean, aren't we supposed to minimize bias as much as possible anyway?
Yeah, I just figured as far as it's the director of the licensing process, they would want to minimize bias in the licensing process specifically, that they would have some ownership over that.
Any other questions? So, can you just read back the changes, please, that Commissioner Title suggested?
Sure. So the job description remains intact with two additions under the essential functions and responsibilities, including a bullet relative to minimizing bias in the application process, and under the knowledge and skills provision or section, adding a bullet that reads experience building cultural competence among a team.
So as so modified, can I have a motion to approve the job description?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
So let the record show that Commissioner Doyle made the motion to approve. Commissioner Tuttle seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let the record show that the Commission unanimously approved the job description for Director of Licensing. Thank you. Sean, you have another one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next one is for a position of a paralegal or legal assistant. With our new general counsel having arrived, she walked into a great deal of work already. And this is really intentional to begin to build out a legal team with really an eye toward making sure that we remain responsive to things like public records requests, responsive as far as the minutes are concerned, and really take a lot of the day-to-day kind of functions that frankly require a lot of attention and detail, and make sure that she has adequate support to perform those functions, and also to begin to relieve the commission themselves, each of you, of some of those day-to-day responsibilities as
Like
well.
minutes?
Minutes would be, I think, a value add for sure. And again, this is really an intentional position to start to build out additional teams. And you'll see as we begin to build that kind of senior team, I'll be bringing more job descriptions as those folks come in to make sure they have adequate support to perform their day-to-day functions.
And I just want to mention, as we've said with previous job descriptions, all of the jobs that we're talking about here are in the organizational chart that drives the budget for fiscal 18. So nothing here is new or will add to our targeted spending for the remainder of this fiscal year.
I should add as well that it is my intention, with your approval today of these job descriptions, to post them at some point this week. And I should also remind the audience that we have 2 openings right now, one for research director, which closes on February 9th, as well as director of government affairs, which also closes on the 9th.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the job description for paralegal? I'm sorry, the title is legal assistant specifically?
It is somewhat interchangeable in that it's a paralegal or legal assistant.
Okay.
Once posted, we'll certainly make a decision on what we actually call it.
Right. Any comments or questions on that?
And I will also include the salaries as well on this.
Just a quick comment.
Sure.
This probably doesn't need to be addressed in the job description, but I'm just thinking about how in reviewing all of the previous, a lot of the previous applications, we got a lot of attorneys for the positions that were not attorney positions. So it may be worth addressing if you'd be willing to consider attorneys as a legal assistant.
We certainly do have all of the applications that have come into the commission. We can sort of sort through those and identify any prospective candidates. Once posted, we can certainly follow up with them and see if they're still interested in applying for this role in particular. We'll take that on.
That's a great suggestion. Okay. Great. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Let the record show that Commissioner Flanagan made the motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Doyle. All in favor of approving this job description?
Aye.
Let the record show the Commission unanimously approved the job description for paralegal or legal assistant. Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Executive Director? So, once again, this time, there's a lot of staff to build, and there's not a lot of time to do it, and a lot of the burden is falling on Sean's shoulders. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you for pushing this forward, Sean.
My pleasure.
Okay, next agenda item is nominations for the Citizens Oversight Review Board. I'm sorry, I think I have the wrong language here, Citizens Review Committee. Again, this was discussed in our policy meetings in the week of December 11th. It was incorporated into our regulations, which were approved the following week. The process is that each of the commissioners will make a nomination or nominations, but it is Sean's decision in terms of finalizing the appointments to this committee. We did say that we would do this by the end of January, so we need to get the nominations to Sean today and to hopefully have Sean be able to finalize it relatively quickly so it can at least come close, if not meet that deadline. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with the rest of the commission, is just ask each of the commissioners to give Sean your nomination, and maybe just a couple points about background on your nominations. And if you don't mind, Commissioner McBride, can we start with you? And again, just to remind everybody, it's a 9-person committee. The agreement that we had was that each of the commissioners, other than myself, would appoint 2 or recommend to Sean to appoint 2, and I would recommend 1, and that's how we'd get to 9. So, Commissioner McBride.
Yeah. So my first nomination is Marcus Johnson Smith. Marcus is a West Cambridge, Massachusetts native, an entrepreneur and author with deep Boston roots. He is a graduate of Northeastern University, a principal at Clearwater Branding, and a co-founder of Kush Groove Lifestyle brand. Marcus came to me by way of former Chief of Staff Jessica Tobner in City Councilor Presley's office, who recommended him. And I have had a couple of conversations with Marcus, and I'm really happy to be making this nomination. I think he's going to bring a really great perspective to the committee. My second nomination, who I am also very happy to be making this nomination, is attorney Stephanie Everett. Stephanie was born and raised in Boston, where she still lives with her husband and children. She operates a solo law firm with an emphasis on criminal law, business contracts, and real estate matters. Prior to practicing law, she devoted her professional career to public service and ensuring equal access to state and local resources and advocating for women's rights. She has served in a number of leadership roles, including the Chief of Staff to the Department of Transitional Assistance. She has served as the Executive Director on multiple boards within the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. She's an adjunct professor at Roxbury Community College and has been really active in youth violence prevention efforts and safety initiatives. She was recognized a number of times over a number of years as a super lawyer and rising star in Boston, and was recognized as a top woman of law by Lawyers Weekly in 2013, and received the Women of Color Changing Our Community award by the Eastern Stars of Prince Hall. I am very happy to be nominating Stephanie to this role. I think that she is going to, again, bring a fantastic perspective, and I think that the work that Marcus and Stephanie are going to do is really, going to be outstanding based on my conversations with both of them.
Thank you. Commissioner Doral?
Thank you.
I am very happy to be nominating Lisa Wong to the Citizens Review Committee. She is currently serving as Deputy Director of the Asian American Civic Association. She is also the president of Soto Home Care, a home health agency. And she has also served as an adjunct professor. It's a very professorial committee we're going to have. And she has also served the city of Fitchburg for 8 years as mayor. So she brings a lot to the table in terms of municipal experience and diversity experience. I'm also happy to nominate Jeff Bean, who is currently working for the U.S. Conference of Mayors as managing director. He has also served as a counselor at large and a mayor of the city of Fitchburg. Apparently I have a theme with my nominations. But by the same token, he does understand economic development and municipal issues, so I think we'll be able to bring a lot to bear in terms of his understanding of economic development and diversity.
Thank you. Commissioner Blandon?
The first person that I had nominated to serve on the committee is Eladia Romero, who serves
I'm sorry, could you say that name again?
Eladia Romero, who is the regional manager for U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, which is out in central Massachusetts, in western Massachusetts. Eladia is also on the board of the Massachusetts Opportunity Council, has worked and been a part of various committees throughout central Mass with regards to helping people navigate government. She has been someone who's been working with immigration issues in the federal government. She works a lot with people with fuel assistance and things like that, so I think she has a pretty good understanding of different populations. The other person that I had nominated is Leona Early, who is the Vice President of Community Programs at the Massachusetts Opportunity Council in Fitchburg, Mass. Leona has sat on a number of committees throughout the community. The search for police chiefs, she's sat on boards for DCF, the Fitchburg Community Connections Coalition Steering Committee member, and I think that she's going to be a great addition to the board. And I do have to say, it's pretty interesting that 4 come from Central Mass.
No, I was worried about being.
Well, you should be very worried.
I think that's great. I think it's great. Commissioner Title?
It was so hard to just pick 2, but I'm very excited to be nominating Andrea James and Judge Leslie Harris. Andrea James is based in Roxbury. She is the founder of Families for Justice as Healing. She's the author of Upper Bunkies Unite and Other Thoughts on the Politics of Mass Incarceration. She is a 2015 Soros Justice Fellow and a recipient of the 2016 RFK Human Rights Award. Andrea worked within the criminal justice system for more than 25 years, from her days as a youth worker to her work as a criminal defense attorney, and in 2009 she was sentenced to serve a 24-month federal prison sentence. After a lifetime of work seeking justice on behalf of disenfranchised people, she was stunned at what she encountered upon entering the prison system as an incarcerated person. Andrea uses her experience to raise awareness of the effect of incarceration of women on themselves, their children, and communities, and to raise awareness of the need to shift from a criminal legal system to a system focused on human justice. Judge Leslie Harris is based in Boston. He is a former Associate Justice for the Suffolk Juvenile Court. He was appointed to the bench in 1994. He has taught also at Roxbury Community College, as well as Metro Pathways Program, Highland Park Free School, New School for Children, and Salem State College. Previously, Judge Harris served as a program consultant to the Museum of Afro-American History in Boston. He was also the director of the Melrose Metco program, where he established and administered a busing program. He's an expert on restorative justice. He was honored by the Robert F. Kennedy Children's Action Corps for his advocacy on behalf of minors who are charged with crimes, and his detention diversion advocacy project lets minors avoid incarceration and stay in school.
Very impressive, yeah. Okay, I wanted to go last just because I wanted to try to make sure that we had some balance here. I wanted to thank Commissioner Tuttle for helping me with this. I think it's great that we have some people in central Massachusetts. I think that for balance of the suggestions that I got from Commissioner Tuttle, I think I'd like to nominate somebody from Springfield, just so that we get out to the far west part of the state. And I'm going to mispronounce her name, so would you? I believe it's Zaida Govan, Z-A-I-D-A. His first name Govan, G-O-V-A-N. Zaida is based in Springfield. She received an MSW degree from Springfield College, began her career as an outpatient substance abuse supervisor with Catholic Charities Institute for the Hispanic Family. She went on to work as a clinical director at the Martin Luther King Jr. Family Services. She comes very highly recommended. I will say that we don't know her personally, but Shalene, Commissioner Tuttle, has had a conversation with her. I think she'll be a great addition to the committee, so I'd like to formally nominate her. So the process now belongs to the executive director. Is there any other guidance that you need at this point?
Not at this point. I will take all of these under strong advisement and proceed accordingly.
And thank you to the commissioners for, I think, a very thoughtful job of coming up with the nominations. And sounds like a pretty powerful committee in terms of its capability and diversity. So thank you. And if I'm correct, if I was counting correctly, we have 1 man and 8 women. So,
It's a theme.
No,
Wait, Mark?
oh, 2 men. Okay, 2.
Yeah.
3.
Okay.
Yep.
3. Oh, okay. I thought it was going to be another thing like the commission, but okay. Okay. Again, no, seriously. All serious. This is an important group of people, and I think I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that everybody put into this. So, thank you. Last formal agenda item is talking about geography for our permanent office. I want to just describe what we did from last week. So we discussed this briefly at our last week's session. There were several suggestions, one from Commissioner Doyle that we put in a criterion talking about proximity to other state agencies, which I have now included. Commissioner Flanagan asked that I include Worcester in the potential areas, so I've done that. Commissioner Tuttle requested that I put in some definition about proximity to public transportation, which Sean and I have worked with DCAM to get, so that's in there as well. So those are the changes. Sean and I have worked with DCAM over the last week to try to get their expertise and input into the rating that I'm going to show right now. Again, the objective here is to have a conversation and give guidance to DCAM as we work with them to develop an RFP. It is not to finalize on a location. I will say that I think it probably makes sense before we go through that conversation and talk about a location, given that location is almost certainly going to be somewhere in eastern Massachusetts, that we have a conversation about a satellite office. And I think there is obviously a question of economics, but presumably economics work out. I very strongly believe that we should have a satellite office somewhere in the western part of the state. Not just because we're a statewide agency, we want to show that, but that's certainly part of the criterion. But the other thing is that a significant percentage of our staff will be inspection and enforcement personnel who will be on the road to licensees around the state, and it seems absurd to make them go to Pittsfield to do an inspection when they're based in eastern Massachusetts. And so both from a kind of optic standpoint as well as from a logistics for our enforcement personnel, I think it's important that we talk about, because I think it makes the decision about kind of the core headquarters easier if we agree that there's going to be a satellite office somewhere out in the western part of the state. So can I get thoughts or comments on that?
On the satellite office, one thing I would recommend checking, perhaps through DCAM, is whether or not there are any existing state agencies that have surplus.
I'm sorry?
Existing state agencies that have surplus space that they wouldn't mind entering into an agreement.
Yeah,
with.
DCAM's, our conversations with DCAM to this point are, they are looking at existing state agencies, not just for the satellite, but for permanent office space. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay.
Any other comments?
So can we define what we mean by the western part of the state? I think that I would imagine the 5 of us all have a general idea, but I do think that if you, as a Massachusetts native and as somebody that with family roots in the actual western part of the state, I'm curious to kind of see how we're how we're defining that and kind of what the search area on a satellite office.
I think we can work with DCAM on that, but I think that's a great question. So I'll start. I think it's Springfield or West. At least that's the way I would define it in my mind. Other comments or thoughts?
I support the idea and I defer to the Massachusetts natives.
I guess we should. How do you define it, Commissioner McBride?
Well, so I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying to think of it as in a. So try to think of it in a way that is going to kind of balance everything that we have talked about, similar to what we're talking about for our, I guess, the primary office, right? So I think that there is an argument to be made for Springfield, and then I think that there's also an argument to be made for there to be like a Worcester or Worcester, Worcester between Worcester and Springfield, in that corridor, just to, think about where people, if we're going to have a licensing division where we're going to have inspectors that are sort of, diffuse and going to all different areas, and thinking that, if you, for instance, if you have a base in Worcester, being able to go both north to Worcester, and then also so I guess I would encourage us to think about it broadly and to think about it maybe from Worcester going west, and weigh those same factors that we were kind of thinking about in terms of transportation, right, and the same factors that are going to play into an Eastern Mass.
I can do the same analysis with the same criteria for that, and I think that makes sense. Go ahead.
So I think we have to be careful about that criteria because, well, first, I don't think we should be a Boston-based agency. I think that it's true that we need to go statewide, and we need to look at the people that we're seeking to hire, right? I mean, so unless we're looking to hire from the Boston area only, we need to think about where people are coming from. So just to keep that in mind, when we talk about the criteria, one of the criteria is being along the commuter rail. Well, the commuter rail stops in Fitchburg. So when you look at west of that, there is no transportation. There is no public transportation. You're lucky if you get on a bus. You're lucky if there's, a bus line, and you can look to Beacon Hill, and they'll tell you there's not enough money for regional transportation. So if we're going to be talking about our satellite office like we're talking about the headquarters, transportation has to come off the table because you're not going to get that in the West. There's just no, short of Senator Lesser getting his east-west rail done in a short amount of time, we're not going to have that.
Probably not in a time frame that's relevant to our conversation.
No. So, Fitchburg is the farthest west. West Fitchburg is the farthest west that the train actually goes. And we need to think about where people have access to highways. Now, the other thing, too, my concern is about the satellite office is how many people. Are we just having it for the investigators who are going to go across the state, or are you seeking to put other people there? Are we seeking to put some of our research team there? Are we looking to put some of, I don't know, any other group of people that we're going to have? Because essentially we're also getting medicinal by December, so we have a whole influx of people that we need to think of. What about their investigators? Where are their people going to go? So my concern is that we need to take a look at this from the, sort of better word, a holistic approach, and look at what we're seeking to have our satellite office look like. And I just think, one, the transportation is a big deal. I think the number of people that we're going to have there is a big deal. Partnering with state agencies is a big deal, and making sure it all comes together.
Let me go back to, I appreciate everything you just said. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I think you're absolutely spot on. My hope today was not to talk specifically about where a satellite would go or what it might look like, just because we haven't really talked about it or prepared for it. My hope was to say, if we agree conceptually that we will have a satellite office someplace, given the criteria outlined, that would make our discussion about focus geography for our main office easier, just by saying, if we agree to do something in eastern Massachusetts, as an example, we're not closing out the rest of the state because we have agreed that conceptually we'll have a satellite office. I think we have to go through a process, just like you articulated, to get to much more specificity around that, which I'm certainly not prepared to do today because we haven't done the work with DCAM on that. But I just wanted to get some conceptual agreement that we need a satellite office, and then go back into the conversation about the main office with the with the commitment, we'll get into the satellite office conversation, very quickly with the criteria that you just articulated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is when we say satellite, how many people?
Yeah, well, we'll work on that and come back and have the same conversation about the satellite office. And we do have at least some sense of the staffing of the medical marijuana organization, but not enough to really get into that. But we will, before we get into the conversation about the satellite office, get that information. Okay? So that being said, if we conceptually agree to have a satellite office, and I just want that as context for the conversation, I really apologize for my PowerPoint skills. These circles are supposed to be more or less the same size.
I was going to ask.
But
Is there?
That is beyond my skill set. So, Sean, we need a PowerPoint person. Would you put a job description together, please, for a PowerPoint person to help me out? So let me describe what we have here, and then let's talk about it. So the columns are what we had last week with the addition of Worcester. So we have downtown Boston, other parts of Boston, as an example, Roxbury, northern suburbs as examples, Malden and Somerville, southern suburbs as examples, Quincy or Braintree, the 128 belt examples would be Waltham or Burlington, the 495 Metro West belt examples would be Framingham or Westboro, and then Worcester. So the only change to what we looked at last week was adding Worcester to the columns. The rows are criteria that we discussed last week and changes I made to those criteria based upon comments that people made last week. So we have cost, we have availability, and it's got two dimensions to it. One is a full service building. So again, Sean and I have worked with DCAM on these criteria and on the valuation of these criteria. And we came up with the language of a full service building that essentially would have the kind of security and maintenance that we believe is necessary for, and DCAM believes is necessary for this facility. So that's what the availability with respect to full service building is. And then parking is both availability and cost. Again, I'll talk about the ratings in a second, but that's those are the availability criteria. Accessibility, we added a third, but there's second, but there's really two dimensions here, which is one, availability to public transportation, accessibility to public transportation in the Commissioner title. To your question, DCAM has used in other RFPs the criterion, within a quarter mile of a transit station, saying that that's about as far as people in general are willing to walk. They did say we can do it one of two ways. We can make it a requirement so that nobody, anybody can bid on the RFP, but we won't evaluate any RFP that doesn't satisfy that criterion. The other, they said, is you can make it a nice to have. We can talk about that before the final RFP is proposed. But their criterion that they suggested is a quarter mile from a transit stop. Okay, so the other accessibility criterion that Commissioner Doyle suggested last week was accessibility to other state agencies. Since while we are an independent agency, we obviously collaborate closely with a number of state agencies, and we'll continue to do so. I then haven't changed the following set of criteria. They're what we talked about last time, which is consistency with our mission, that we are a statewide agency. I certainly agree with all the comments that Commissioner Flanagan made to that extent. Participation by DHC, disproportionately harmed communities. I actually think that, and this is just my opinion, I'm speaking for myself right now, but I actually believe that locating our office in a disproportionately harmed community, if everything else makes sense, is actually something that would be an important thing to do if the job we have as a commission is to help those communities participate fully in the industry. So I just have a criteria about whether there are disproportionately harmed communities, the 29 communities that were defined by the research that we did, can we locate in one of those? And then a model state agency in terms of the kind of office space that we think would be accessible to the public and would promote the kind of culture and work environment that we're all committed to work in. So no changes to those. I did my own kind of first pass at this, and then Sean and I spent some time on the phone with a couple of people from DCAM, I think it was yesterday. And they made modifications and suggestions to this. The color coding, I think, is pretty straightforward, which is green is positive, which means it meets those criteria. Yellow means it's neutral. There are some issues, but there's no showstopper. And red is that the criterion is not met. And again, I apologize for the fact that the circles are not of the same size.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question about
Sure.
the public transportation? In the
Yeah.
asterisk, I think it says MBTA Rapid Transit Station, which is the
Yeah, I think we need
the
to broaden that.
subways.
Yeah, I think we need
That's
to broaden
not
that.
commuter rail.
Yeah, no, I think we need to broaden that, Commissioner Flanagan. I think the same 1/4 mile radius probably. But
Of any MBTA station.
Yeah.
Because
I-
there's a ton of buses.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Commissioner.
Could I ask a question? One blob is actually surprising me in its color, which is under the 128 belt as it is relates to public transportation.
Mhm.
The 128 belt is less friendly to public transportation. That genuinely surprises me. So I was just wondering the factual underpinning to that. Because there are quite a few commuter rail stations.
Yeah, I think
Peppers.
that
Yeah.
DCAM just probably has when you have MTA, it's just a little bit more flexible. But I don't think it's something that should be out of line or ruled out. That was a DCAM suggestion.
Okay.
But these are this is not meant to be an overly scientific analysis. Obviously, it's meant to be judgmental, and I don't have any problem. I don't think that the 128 belt gets ruled out for that.
Yeah, no, I was surprised by it. That's all.
Okay.
The other question I have, and yes, I'm going to harp on Worcester because I am, but when it says other state agencies, I find it hard that Worcester is in the red because they've not only got the hospital, DCF, DMH, there's got a ton of properties out that way that I've had to travel for 10 years to meetings at every year that I know that they're there. So I would ask DCAM what the rationale is for that. Only because I've heard from multiple people that there is space available in other agency buildings.
Any questions about the data or
I kind of have the same feeling about the 495 belt that Commissioner Flanagan does about Worcester, because I do know that there are commuter rail trains that go to that area from the Boston area. So I'm not sure how they got to all the way red, because I would have expected it to be somewhat similar to the other, the northern suburbs, the southern suburbs, the 128 belt, the 495 belt. They may start getting fewer and far between because it is spokes going out. But
Well, I think if we stick with our criterion that it is, within, and we can agree on but if it's a 1/4 mile from a train station, then I think that
Maybe
that's
that's it.
a solution. Which is
Yeah.
if it's a 1/4 mile from a commuter rail line or an MTA station, it works, and if it's not, it doesn't work. And then we don't have to get into this, judgmental,
Mhm.
judging the quality of transportation as opposed to it's just a factual analysis.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to go back and.
No, it's just the results are surprising. That's all.
Okay. I look at this and nothing jumps off the map. I mean, I was hoping that there was going to be one thing that was going to be all green and that would make this an easy decision. I don't believe this is an easy decision. I do think that from a cost standpoint and from a mission statement standpoint, downtown Boston is probably not something we want to do. But that's about the only thing that I see. I think that inside of Boston, communities like Roxbury and Dorchester, the issue, at least according to DCAM, is one of availability of space and parking. It also, does not kind of satisfy the mission, if you will, of being a statewide agency, even though it's not downtown Boston, it's still Boston. So when I was looking at this, and again, this is just my opinion, I was looking at the northern suburbs, southern suburbs, and perhaps out as far as 128. But there's nothing, as I said, that jumps off this and says we need to do that. I do believe, however, and this is again is just my opinion, that if we can satisfy the set of criteria we have here and locate in a community that's been disproportionately harmed by previous laws, I think that's a really good thing and important thing to do. And I would like to at least get others' thoughts on that. I think if we use that criterion, we can start giving DCAM a much more narrowly focused set of options to look at. So I'd like to put that on the table for discussion. Any comments?
I think the next slide has the.
Yeah,
It would be
yeah,
nice to have
okay.
a reminder
Yeah,
of what they are.
So just so you did it, these are the 29 that
came up with. The reds are just the near north and the near south, so that you don't need to pay attention to them. But if you think about the other criteria and you think about doing the near north or the near south suburbs, or even as far as 128, you certainly can add more to these to this list. But these are the 29.
I guess my question is that what helps, how are we helping the community just by having an office there? And again, I know optics is a big thing, but what else comes with that? Because I feel like if we're hiring from across the state, where our home base is simply a home base. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree with Commissioner Flanagan. I think definitely if it was being used as a tiebreaker, that would be important. I think it should be a factor. I think we should probably look at the full list of 50 that we had to see if the communities are on there. But in general, unless we're picturing our office as a place where people from the communities would like walk in, which I don't think we're picturing. I think it's more of outreach programs.
Right.
That it would just be one factor, but not as important as parking location.
Other comments?
And my one other comment, sorry, is that I thought we had mentioned early on that we were going to also try to go across the state and host meetings in different places, so that would bring us across the state into all the communities, or into as many as we can.
Yep, we did say that.
Any comments?
So I think that to Commissioner Title's point, I think that is a very valid point. So part of this actually ties in with our licensing process, right, and what we're setting up. So one of the things that we talked about, kind of going back to that discussion, is whether we're going to make this so that we have e-forms, so that you can really, the focus is going to be on being able to fulfill that process from a remote location and not have it be something where you have to walk in, where you have a paper form. I think that makes a tremendous amount of difference, just generally, on a whole range of issues. But I do think that it goes to Commissioner Title's point that I think that the focus does need to be on, maybe less about the community that we are licensing, because we will be out in that community. We will be doing outreach to those communities. We are going to be statewide. We're going to be going around the state and hosting meetings. I think that it maybe does need to go towards sort of workforce development and ability to attract the best talent, to make it accessible, and to provide a platform for building the commission as an agency, and enabling the ability to attract the people that then are going to do the best job and going out to the community that we're serving.
Commissioner Dwyer?
I agree with pretty much everything that has been said, so I feel no need to add to it.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to go with tiebreaker. I actually think that there is value, even if people aren't walking into the office. I think there's value clearly from a symbolic standpoint, but in addition to that, I just think, an office building or an office in one of these communities, we would park there, we would eat there. I don't want to overstate the benefit, but I think there's clear benefit, and so I'm happy to go with that as a tiebreaker. I think it's a pretty important tiebreaker, but I'm happy to go with that as a tiebreaker. I'm not sure where we are. I think we can go back to DCAM and say, let's revise the criterion so that instead of making judgment calls about transportation, we say any place that we can get within a quarter mile of a public transportation solution, whether it's the MTA or whether it's regional trains. That works. I guess the question is, how far out are we willing to consider going? Should we give DCAM guidance to go out as far as 495 in the Metro West area, or stay within the 128? Again, with the explicit, at least good faith commitment, we're going to have a satellite office. Go ahead, Commissioner Brown.
Well, and I think that you just sort of answered what I was going to say, which is I think that those two things need to work together,
yeah, of course.
For a host of reasons, and so it's why I think that we really need to be, thinking about the satellite office and sort of a main office or primary office at the same time because of the coverage piece and because I think it will determine what the radius is, right, or of kind of where we need to be or want to be. So.
This is more of a question I think for Sean, but are we getting one of those analysis slides for the satellite office as well, or are we just going to choose and go from there? Or is DCAM asking for those same criteria for a satellite office?
So I think ultimately what we need to work on with DCAM is the biggest question mark at this point is our search area, and then what criteria we are going to use to evaluate any responses. So the concern they would have at this point with the search area for any main office is that we are casting probably the widest possible net. And so, for instance, if it's limited to 1/4 mile of any public transportation that includes commuter rail, we are responsible for publishing notice of the RFP once done, and then evaluating each and every response that we get. So if we get 300 responses, that will take some time to go through and evaluate. So if we're able to narrow that down more directly, it will facilitate fewer responses, of course, but we'll have a little bit more certainty as to where we might be located. The same process for any satellite office. The other criteria that they look for is your anticipated headcount, which you've already mentioned, and also the type of employee that's going to be there. So, for instance, if it's the commissioners and a legal team, and that'll give you office space, whereas if it's kind of swing space, and I do know, for instance, I have asked DCAM, there are a lot of offices that the state owns and operates that are Western Massachusetts, including in Springfield, to see if there's any flexibility or freedom there to allow for, whether it's we need 10 spaces that someone can just pop in, plug in a computer, and operate from. So we can explore that more directly with them as far as if we wanted to entertain the idea of a satellite office, what other criteria would we need? And of course, all of this needs to include a conversation about our budget, which is maintaining 2 offices, employing that number of people, if there's any vehicles that are necessary to the state. And on the satellite office, I would just caution to say we should think about eventually where the concentration of licensees are going to be. If there are a lot of offices in Western Massachusetts, a lot of licensees in Western Massachusetts, we will need to be there more often. If there are not as many licensees in Western Massachusetts, we may not have to visit as frequently. But that's more food for thought for the philosophical conversation of the value of a satellite office or where it should be located.
So then my question for DCAM would be that if we're not going to include the access to transit for a regional office or satellite office because it's further west and there is really no transit, do we need to look at access to the highways? Because I think when you think of Worcester, you can get to the Pike, you can get to 495, you get 290, you can get to Boston or to Springfield in relatively easy access. Whereas if we were off sort of the beaten path, then that would be more difficult to get to. So if you're talking about investigators or whatever we're calling them, if we're talking about all of that, then we want them to be able to come in and out very easily to the city, to wherever we are. So is that something that we need to ask DCAM as well, or is that one of the criteria that they use?
So it could be something we use as criteria to evaluate the responses, but it may not be something we use to rule a response out from evaluation.
Okay.
So if I can summarize kind of where we are, it sounds like we should go back, DCAM, work with them on criteria for satellite office so that we can then have a conversation about both of them simultaneously. I think make some of the modifications that came up in this conversation with respect to some of these ratings and talk more about just proximity to public transit. But it doesn't sound like we're prepared to do anything right now in terms of giving DCAM guidance without coming back and having a conversation with respect to the satellite office and agree on criteria and agree on possible locations of the satellite office so we can make those decisions or give that guidance to DCAM simultaneously. So.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Is there a way that DCAM can also give us an estimate of what it costs per square footage in the areas that we're looking at? Is there a general answer to that people would know of, or it's specific to the building?
It sometimes will be specific to the building and whatever amenities it provides. What I can ask them is, most of their answers have come from their experience in locating other state agencies to say, this state agency is located in this region, they pay X per square foot. And so they could develop a kind of a range of sorts.
Because my concern is that, given the budget that we have, or the budget that the governor has provided, we don't know what the House and Senate are going to do.
But then it's also, if I could interject, it's not relevant for the 2019 budget. This really will kick in, other than the development costs that we might have to incur. It won't kick in until the fiscal 20 budget.
Because
It's going to be
aren't we
15
meeting in May or June?
It's 15 months, so it's going to be 1 or 2 months in fiscal 19 if we get in May.
Right, so it's still 1 or 2.
And so
Yeah.
it's a factor, but it's going to be relevant money,
Yeah.
given it's only 1 or 2 months. But I think getting some specific cost estimates makes sense as far as process. Commissioner Tuttle, looked like you were
Oh, thank you.
starting to say something or thinking about saying something.
I was thinking about the public transit question, and it seems to me that if we have a satellite office and we're not considering public transportation as a factor there because people are probably driving, which makes sense.
It depends on how west you want to go.
Depending on how west you want to go. For the other office, then, when I saw the slide with the public transportation circles, they were intuitive to me as someone who takes the T to work every day. It seems like a generally accepted principle to me that if it's on the subway, that's more. I'm like sweating right now because that the subway is considered to be more accessible than the commuter rail, and so that's why I thought they were colored the way that they were.
I think that might, we'll have to talk to DCAM about that, but I think that's a fair assessment.
And my only concern about that is that the subway for us ends in Cambridge. So you don't go further west with the subway. We end at Elway.
But that's why we have a satellite office that's not considering public transportation,
Yeah.
right?
So, go ahead.
I would just like to throw out there that Worcester just in the last several years redeveloped that beautiful station downtown. So there is, it's not subway access, but there is definitely a good public transportation option, albeit the commuter rail is less convenient. But it is, I think that I'm a big fan of Worcester, generally speaking, because I think that in addition to it being centrally located, having less expensive office space, having ample parking, being located in a way that you can get to a lot of different routes, it also does have a very attractive option of being able to take a train right into downtown Worcester. So I'm just going to throw that out there. That I guess like the conversation about Worcester not having a public transportation option, I quarrel with that a little bit. It might not be as robust as some other options, but I quarrel with it a little bit.
Do you feel like you have enough to go back to DCAM, Sean, and on this and on the, both on the main office and the satellite office, and get some, I guess, a little bit more granularity on some of these analytical points?
So I do. I think that's where we have to go next, given timing, is to get to a granular level with the search area in particular.
I think you're right. I mean, we might not be able to get there. I can't forecast consensus among the commission, but I agree with your point that if we don't narrow it from kind of everything that's on this chart right now, we'll get done, but we'll have a lot of proposals to work our way through. So I think if it's possible, I think it's worth taking one more shot at seeing if we can't give some guidance to DCAM to narrow the area a little bit.
I have a list of questions for you.
So I don't think we're ready to do that today, and it really gets into kind of the next. So thank you. Gets into the next topic, which is my proposal is that we don't have a public commission meeting next week. I don't think it's going to be possible, given the schedule I put up earlier, to get a quorum together. So unless there are objections from any commissioners, I'm going to suggest that we don't have one next week. I'm going to hope that we can do one the following week. So that's the week of the 12th, I believe. I'm not going to propose a specific time right now, but I do think it's probably necessary to do that. Hopefully, one will have that'll give DCAM sufficient time to work with you, Sean, to put some more granularity around this, and without making you feel any more pressure than you already feel. Hopefully, that'll give us time to have a contract or two
for the technology to evaluate and hopefully approve. So we will post with the normal 48-hour notice a meeting for sometime the week of the 12th of February, but there will be no meeting next week unless there are any objections from any of the commissioners on that. I wouldn't have expected there to be, but I just wanted to make sure. I am not aware of any other agenda items that I was not aware of at the time of this posting, so there being no further business before the commission, I'm adjourning this meeting as of 11:34. Thank you very much.